Witnesses deserving of trust report on the incredible maneuverability of flying saucers. These ships may be extraterrestrial, an illusion, or something more sinister. A program is being considered regarding the mysteries of Nazi secret weapons and the post-war conspiracy of silence that remains unsolved to this day. The National UFO Reporting Center records approximately 400 reports of unidentified flying objects each month. The most frequently mentioned objects are those shaped like discs or triangles, as well as flying lights. Many believe in the extraterrestrial origin of UFOs, but there is another hypothesis. What we call UFOs may have been created during the years of World War II in Nazi Germany. A recent investigation established that Reich engineers were developing a flying apparatus in the shape of a disc with vertical takeoff and an advanced thrust system. After World War II, American military officials secretly transported these developments to the United States, along with thousands of German scientists and engineers. In 1947, 2 years after the end of the war, the first wave of UFO sightings was noted in the United States and around the world. It is possible that UFOs are a secret American weapon created based on trophy German developments. To answer this question, it is worth recalling the most credible cases of encounters with UFOs reported by professional pilots trained in aerial observation. The first such reports date back to the last months of World War II. According to declassified British and American documents, Allied pilots saw unusual flying objects in the sky over Germany that they could not identify. In attempts to make contact, these objects did not respond like ordinary airplanes. The pilots referred to these objects as Foo Fighters, a term that arose from a favorite expression of a popular comic book hero. However, there was nothing comical about these encounters themselves. Researcher Keith Chester interviewed 12 individuals who had seen Foo Fighters and analyzed dozens of reports from Allied aviation pilots. They claimed that these objects ascended vertically and evaded pursuit at speeds of several thousand kilometers per hour. Of the veterans he spoke with, only one remains alive today, Major Harold Augsperberg, former crew commander of the 415th. He recalls, "I saw a light to the starboard side. We could not tell how close it was, but when we turned, it turned as well. My radar operator looked and said that he saw some kind of light, but the radar did not show an airplane. We turned to see what it was, and when we got closer, it shot up like a rocket." At first, the pilots did not tell anyone about this incident, and this episode was classified. We did not talk about it. The report went through the chain of command. Many believed it was a secret weapon of the Germans. To investigate the incident, a scientist from Washington District of Columbia was sent to France, but no answers were found, and the pilots were ordered to remain silent. However, soon information leaked out, and major newspapers published reports about mysterious objects, such as fireballs chasing American bombers. The Allies had good reasons to fear any new German weapon. England was being attacked by the latest V-1 and V-2 rockets, and German fighters were shooting down Allied bombers. Hitler claimed that German engineers were working on a new wonder weapon, an instrument of victory. If the Foo Fighters pursuing Allied planes were indeed a secret weapon of the Nazis, then it was being produced in Germany, in ultra-secret bunkers located 7 kilometers underground. Since the summer of 1944, the German war machine, escaping heavy Allied bombings, gradually moved underground. In Poland, Austria, and Czechoslovakia, slaves built extensive underground complexes. These underground complexes included factories for producing munitions and jet engines, as well as laboratories and design bureaus where scientists worked on creating the weapon of victory at Hitler's command. Fighters equipped with the latest turbojet engines developed by Hans von Ohain took to the skies. The Horten brothers were creating aircraft of the space age, such as the Flying Wing, while Alexander Lippisch was working on a vertical takeoff vehicle. In Peenemünde, the legendary rocket engineer Wernher von Braun was assembling the first ballistic missiles, while bold designers like Victor Schauberger were exploring new types of propulsion. It was a time when ideas went beyond the conventional, and many considered them too unusual. Scientific concepts that were perceived as absurd in the West, the Nazis claimed were true science. The operation was led by SS General Dr. Hans Kammler, who, as an engineer, improved the Oswenzima furnace, increasing its efficiency. In 1943, he commanded the liquidation of the Warsaw Ghetto, and in 1944, he was entrusted with the leadership of the entire program for the development of secret weapons for the Nazis. At the Škoda factory in Pilsen, Czechoslovakia, Kammler and a group of selected specialists invented and tested new types of armaments. Some designs were drastically different from the usual ones, and only a small group of people was privy to all the intricacies of these developments. The Germans worked on various types of aviation weaponry, including aircraft with a rounded shape and vertical takeoff and landing systems. The first task of Kammler's group was vertical takeoff, as there were no longer any airfields left in Germany. They had been destroyed by Allied bombs. The Germans needed a combat aircraft that did not require 300 meters of tar for takeoff and landing. One of the projects, Die Glocke, seemed particularly promising. Igor Witkowski, a Polish specialist in the history of aeronautics, had been researching the bell for over 20 years. As a result of his studies, he concluded that the tests of the bell were conducted underground in the state of Wenceslas. The bell consisted of a ceramic casing, under which there was a rod and two ceramic cylinders rotating around a single axis in opposite directions. The cylinders began to rotate when high voltage was applied, creating thrust. Witkowski believes that the Germans were trying to create charged vortex flows that could vertically lift an object into the air, similar to a tornado's vortex. Everything, including mathematical calculations, indicates that this was possible. The question remained, were the Germans really on the verge of a breakthrough in engine design? In April 1945, when Hitler's army was nearly defeated, it was time for scientists and engineers to leave Germany. But where were they to flee? And what would become of their inventions? Could the answer to this question lie in the crash of a UFO over Pennsylvania 20 years later? A UFO was spotted in our airspace, appearing over a village and then disappearing from sight. What is a UFO? Extraterrestrial aircraft, or does this phenomenon have a more prosaic explanation? According to trophy documents, during the years of World War II, the Nazis worked on aircraft of fundamentally different design with vertical takeoff. One of the projects, the Bell, seemed particularly promising. At the end of the war, all materials disappeared. 20 years later, on the 9th of December 1965 at 16:30, witnesses reported a UFO crash in a wooded area near Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. Reports mentioned an object resembling the shape of an acorn. One witness even claimed that it looked like a bell. Stan Gordon, a local resident and expert on the Kecksburg incident, became one of those who investigated this mysterious event. The object in question was approximately 4 meters long and 3.5 meters in diameter. It was a cast metal object of an unusual golden, bronze, and copper color. It had another distinctive feature. At the base, in an area that one of the witnesses referred to as the bumper, there were unusual protruding markings. The witnesses from Kecksburg soon realized that this was a harbinger of change. 2 individuals emerged from the woods and sternly ordered the residents to leave the area, declaring a quarantine. Soon, military personnel arrived on the scene. Witnesses reported that it was a military transport moving at high speed from the city, taking the object away. Stan Gordon, the investigator, believed that the object was transported to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, located 400 kilometers to the west in Ohio. Just 2 days after the incident, an unusual order was placed at the base: ceramic bricks. The ordered batch consisted of 65,000 pieces of special sapper bricks with a double glazed coating intended for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. A major, a truck driver who later delivered this order, gave an interview in which he claimed to have seen some object in the shape of a bell in a hangar. He recounted, "I entered the building, saw a bell, and there were builders working above it, constructing a brick wall to seal it in." But why ceramic bricks? Ceramics are used for thermal and electrical insulation. Were the military attempting to insulate the object? Perhaps its resemblance to the Nazi bell was not coincidental. According to some reports, the Kecksburg device was also encased in ceramic bricks. Igor Witkowski, a Polish journalist writing about aviation and space technology, claims that the Nazi bell was also encased in a ceramic shell. Witkowski believes that the bell was studied in Poland, in a mysterious structure known as the henge. This structure stands in water, and the water reservoir is covered with ceramic tiles. The German bell has another distinctive feature: characteristic markings. The Nazis used occult symbols, and it was believed that such symbols were inscribed on the bell. To understand this, it is necessary to return to Germany at the end of the Second World War. In April 1945, Hitler ordered the execution of 62 scientists who were working on the Bell Project. The concentration camp prisoners who labored on the secret underground project were also executed. This mass murder was led by SS General Hans Kammler, who was responsible for Hitler's secret weapon projects. The entrances to the tunnels were blown up, and all the prisoners who knew about the production and its purposes were buried alive. With them, the mystery of this project was lost to oblivion. Hitler entrusted Kammler with erasing all traces of the Nazis' secret project, but the Führer did not know that Kammler was preparing to betray him. In 1981, former Hitler's Minister of War, Albert Speer, confessed that Kammler had shared with him his secret plans to transfer all secrets to the Americans in exchange for personal immunity. Did Kammler carry out these plans? In April 1945, having access to the Horten flying wing and leading the jet revolution of von Ohain, as well as being responsible for the development of von Braun's ballistic missiles and the mysterious bell, he left his base in Pilsen and disappeared forever. We do not know what happened to Hans Kammler at the end of the war. His body was never found, and there were 6 reports of his death. He was hardly mentioned at the Nuremberg trials, although he bore personal responsibility for the destruction of the Warsaw Ghetto and the construction of the crematoria in Auschwitz. The cases of other SS officers who were killed or went missing were considered in their absence. However, an exception was made for Hans Kammler. This raises questions. Was this an oversight by the Allies, or did Kammler execute his plan to transfer secrets to the United States? A specialist like Kammler could have been a trump card for both the Russians and the Americans. If he really went to America, he found himself in the company of the best minds of Germany. As part of a secret program known as Operation Paperclip, the American military sought out and transported engineers and scientists from the Reich to the States. The American public only knew of a few such individuals. Wernher von Braun became a prominent example of this kind. Most Americans who heard about Operation Paperclip and the resettlement of German scientists to the United States believed that there were only a few hundred such people. However, the declassified documents stored in national archives show that in reality there were thousands of them. Hans von Ohain, a pioneer of German jet aviation, worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Alexander Lippisch, a specialist in vertical takeoff aircraft, went to White Sands, New Mexico. Along with him, experimental samples were transported to America, such as the flying wing of the Horten brothers and mountains of documentation. By the beginning of 1946, Germany had lost all of its military potential. In June 1947, the first widely known case of a UFO encounter occurred in the United States. The UFO was seen by Kenneth Arnold, a pilot flying over the state of Washington. He noticed a group of crescent-shaped aircraft with unusual flight characteristics. Dr. Bruce Maccabee, a physicist and optics specialist, investigated this case. Arnold did not see wings, engines, or vertical stabilizers, nothing that is typically present on an airplane. Nevertheless, he concluded that it was some kind of new flying vehicle. The description of their movements made by Arnold led to the emergence of the term flying saucer. Just 2 weeks later, the loudest event related to UFOs occurred in America. In July 1947, near the military airfield at Roswell, a flying object crashed. To examine the crash site, the Air Base Command made a sensational statement, issuing a press release claiming that a flying saucer had crashed in the desert. However, just a few hours after the first press release, the military made a 180-degree turn and informed the press that the crashed object was a weather balloon. This raised questions. Was it an innocent mistake or deliberate disinformation? From the very beginning, they wanted to hide something from the public. If they were hiding not a crashed planetary ship in Roswell, then what? Will further investigations uncover a connection to Nazi trophy technology? For many, the most convincing sign of a connection between the Roswell incident and the Nazis lies in the shape of the flying object. It was clearly a flying wing. It is an established fact that the Nazis were working on this model. The crash in Roswell occurred a flight distance away from White Sands, the air base where the Horton brothers' flying wing first took to the air. And just 2 weeks before Roswell, Kenneth Arnold witnessed the first UFO in history that became known to the general public. Is this not what the military is trying to hide? The American prototype of a flying wing, created based on Nazi developments, became part of a broader mystery. After Roswell, the number of UFO sightings sharply increased, reaching a peak in the 1950s. Flying saucers were spotted everywhere, and fantastic disc-shaped objects flew in the sky. What could this mean? There were tens of thousands of sightings, and numerous documents indicated that in 1952 there was literally an aerial war over America. The public was convinced that an alien invasion had begun. Even President Truman spoke on the matter, asserting, "Such things happen all the time. I am talking about flying saucers." By the end of the 1950s, this idea was picked up and developed by pop culture. UFOs, or unidentified flying objects, are often described as flying saucers, messengers from space. In 1952, the American Air Force launched Project Blue Book, under which a special unit at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base began collecting reports of UFOs and assessing their credibility. Analysis of these reports showed that the crash in Roswell was not the only incident that occurred near a secret American military base. By the end of the 1950s, the topic of UFOs became popular in pop culture, and so-called hotspots were identified where UFOs were sighted. This occurred particularly often near ultra-secret military bases, where German scientists were sent after the war under Operation Paperclip. One such hotspot was Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Early newspaper reports claimed that it was there that the object that crashed in Roswell was transported. This base housed the headquarters of Project Blue Book. In 1965, it was reported that the object was allegedly seen in one of the hangars, where after the war, some of the most prominent scientists from Nazi Germany worked. Dr. Paul Zitz, now retired, worked with German scientists under Operation Paperclip in the late 1950s. He recalls, "I worked with 7 people, and there were about 40 on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Being primarily loyal citizens of Germany, they wanted Germany to win, and I see nothing wrong with that. When they came here, they became loyal Americans. However, this loyalty did not extend to discussing Germany's most secret weapons development programs." Zitz also mentions that his boss, Dr. Wilhelm Nachtstedt, was aware of some of these radical theories of gravity and flying saucers, although he himself was not interested in the issue. Nevertheless, American military officials showed interest in these matters. According to declassified government documents from 1995, the United States Air Force spent $5 million on a top-secret program known as the Silver Bug Project. This project, which originated in the Canadian company Avro in Toronto, focused efforts on creating a new flying vehicle known as the Avro car. Bill Zook, a Canadian aviation historian, describes the Avro car as an experimental project initiated to explore the possibilities of a disc-shaped flying vehicle. According to the declassified documentation of the Silverbug project, the Avro car could reach speeds of up to 3 Mach and achieve a flight altitude of 30 kilometers. It was equipped with a vertical takeoff system based on the Coanda effect, which was discovered by Henri Coanda in the 1930s. This effect generated lift through the airflow passing alongside a curved surface. The project was led by the talented British engineer John Frost, who openly acknowledged that he drew inspiration from German research during World War II. In 1953, he consulted with a German engineer who claimed that tests of a flying disc were conducted at a special testing ground near Prague. The acknowledgement that tests of the German flying saucer indeed took place was not the only connection between the Avro car and Nazi Germany. One of the leading consultants for the project was Alexander Lippisch, the project engineer for the V-1, who worked alongside other German scientists on the vertical takeoff system. Frost worked diligently, studying the know-how of German scientists, and it seems he learned something from their developments that convinced him of the potential of the Avro car. This raises the question, could this be related to the top-secret NATO project named Repulsion? The device, created by Austrian engineer Victor Schauberger, bore a striking resemblance to Frost's Avro car, not only in appearance but also in its characteristics. Jörg Schauberger, the grandson of Victor and the owner of the original unpowered model of the Repulsion device, recalls that it was this device that brought fame to his grandfather. The Repulsion became one of the experiments in overcoming gravity using vacuum. It is important to note that Schauberger worked in the Mauthausen concentration camp, which adds context to his achievements. The design of the Repulsion, like that of the Avro car, utilized the Coanda effect. Jörg Schauberger shares memories of the first tests that astonished the entire team. One day, the device soared to the very ceiling of the workshop. Victor, observing this, suggested that the machine contained not just levitation, but true anti-gravity. However, in 1944, when Schauberger and his group achieved certain successes, the SS ordered him to head east. In one of his letters, he mentions that he must travel to Poland to a secret factory, and after that, there was no news from him for a long time. Poland became the place where work continued on the equipment, including the Bell project, yet another attempt by the Nazis to overcome gravity. The question of whether Schauberger participated in this work remains open. At the end of the war, the blueprints and models of Schauberger fell into the hands of the Allies. After the war, Victor claimed that the United States had stolen important items from him that were necessary for his work. All functioning models of Repulsion disappeared. A few years later, when the first wave of reports about flying saucers began in the United States, Schauberger was greatly surprised. He told journalists, "I made the first flying saucer. Perhaps I am the father of UFOs." This raises the question, could Victor Schauberger's models have helped the United States in creating flying saucers? If so, they did not assist John Frost, as the Silverbug project did not yield outstanding results. During tests, the Aerocar took off vertically, but its capabilities were limited by low power. To lift off the ground, the thrust had to operate at full power, and then it could ascend to about 1 meter, moving at that height at a speed of 60 kilometers per hour. Frost proved that from an aerodynamic perspective, a flying disc is possible, but he had neither the time nor the resources to develop a sufficiently powerful engine. In 1961, the Silverbug project was closed, and all rights to the Aerocar were transferred to the Ministry of Defense. It seemed that the idea of flying saucers had been buried, but was that truly the case? Just 4 years later, in 1965, a bell-shaped object crashed in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania. representatives of the military and government agencies of the United States immediately appeared at the crash site. One eyewitness claims that the object remarkably resembled the Nazi flying apparatus Bell. This raises questions. Did secret developments of trophy German technologies continue? And if so, is it possible that they remain secret to this day? Former journalist Bill Swidman, who specialized in aviation and investigated secret projects, claims that these projects are funded by Congress, but the Department of Defense does not acknowledge their existence. This means that the very fact of the program's existence is a secret, and its functions, goals, and objectives are not disclosed. If the Air Force continued to work on the flying saucer program, it could be hidden in the area of Groom Lake in the Nevada desert, known as Area 51. This territory, exceeding 5,000 square kilometers, is remote, uninhabited, and heavily guarded. The legendary Air Force testing ground for ultra-secret experimental aircraft. If you get too close to Area 51, you will see a warning sign ending with words printed in red: "Shoot to kill." By the most conservative estimates, the costs of secret programs related to Area 51 amount to around $45 billion a year. The secrecy surrounding this area and the strict restrictions imposed on personnel maintain a wall of silence. People who have worked on these programs experience serious fear, fearing that the disclosure of information could lead to long prison sentences. This fear keeps them silent. In 1975, work begins on the ultra-secret stealth program, a fighter jet invisible to enemy radar. The project is carried out in a secret facility at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where test flights are conducted at night. Even the base command did not know what was happening. The project remained secret for 13 years, until 1988, when the world first saw the incredible F-117. Then followed the most secret of all projects, the stealth bomber Northrop B-2. Jack Northrop had long been fascinated by the idea of a flying wing, understanding that the most effective way to reduce drag is to eliminate the tail and fuselage. The Germans demonstrated that this was possible in the design of the jet aircraft Horten H-9. Only one prototype remains, which never flew, and after its capture by the Americans, it was placed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. When the B-2 bomber was first unveiled to the public in 1988, it bore a striking resemblance to the German H-9, the flying wing, as well as the famous UFO that Kenneth Arnold spoke about. Perhaps all of this was part of a design process that stretched over 50 years and produced an aircraft that the uninitiated could easily mistake for a UFO. One thing remains clear. If this experimental aircraft is seen by someone, or if it crashes, it is necessary to immediately misinform the public. For this, it was essential to tell people that they had seen not a top-secret military plane, but alien spacecraft. The leadership of the armed forces deliberately manipulates the UFO myth to provide cover for the secret programs they have been working on. In 1997, the CIA admitted that it had actively participated in a disinformation campaign about UFOs. Every time the subject of Area 51 comes up, someone starts talking about UFOs and little green men. If this is the result of a conscious attempt at disinformation, then the organizer of this campaign could be congratulated for the skill of execution. So what is happening in Area 51? Thousands of people are still working there, even though the tests of the last Tacit Blue aircraft were conducted in 1976. Thus, for over 30 years, work has continued on secret programs that cost hundreds of billions of dollars. Horten H-9, Roswell, Stealth, F-117, B-2, all of this is securely kept secret by the U.S. military, including information about flying saucers. And what about other countries and witnesses? Is there an explanation for the astonishing cases of UFO encounters outside the United States? And does this explanation lead to the engineers of Nazi Germany, Nazism, and the UFO mystery? Of all the legends surrounding Nazi UFOs, the most controversial rumors are that some Nazis escaped from defeated Germany along with experimental flying vehicles. There is substantial evidence that some high-ranking SS officers indeed avoided capture by the Allies and went underground. In the far south of Latin America, in Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay, there are vast German enclaves. One of those who disappeared without a trace was General Hans Kammler, the head of the secret German program for developing new weapons. If anyone knew the truth about flying saucer technology, it was him. On the 17th of April 1945, Kammler sent his last telegram, in which he rejected the request of SS Chief Heinrich Himmler for a Junkers truck. Why did Himmler need a truck? This question raises a multitude of speculations. Some experts suggest that the truck could have been a code name for the six-engine Junkers 390, an aircraft capable of flying 10,000 miles without refueling. Only 2 such aircraft were built, and one of them was in Kammler's possession. After the war, the Junkers 390 was never found. This raises questions. Did Kammler use it to escape? If so, where could he have fled to, and what did he take with him? In 1945, there was a surge of UFO sightings over South America. This suggests that Hitler's engineers may have found a new base. In the early post-war years, thousands of UFOs were observed primarily in North America, which allows for the assumption that the Nazis fled to South America and continued their experiments from South American bases. The president of Argentina, Juan Perón, authorized the issuance of 1,000 passports to Nazi scientists and engineers. War criminals such as Klaus Barbie and Adolf Eichmann were eventually found in South America. Reimer Horton, the creator of the flying wing, moved to Argentina in 1948. Since then, the number of UFO sightings in South America has continued to grow alongside reports from the United States. However, there is no reliable information that Kammler or other designers developing flying discs joined these hiding Nazis. Where could Kammler have disappeared to? According to some reports, he and his group fled to Antarctica at the end of World War II. It was said that the Germans attempted to establish a permanent colony in Antarctica. It is known that from 1938 to 1939, Germany outfitted an Antarctic expedition and claimed rights to part of the territory, achieving significant success in constructing underground bases. This Antarctic version is supported by the actions of the American military fleet in 1946, just 1 year after the end of the war and a year before the crash in Roswell. Operation High Jump became one of the most thrilling episodes of this entire story. Admiral Richard Byrd, the most famous American Arctic explorer, led an expedition to the South Pole in 1947. This was the largest naval expedition in history to the Antarctic region, involving 13 ships and 4,700 personnel, including the latest aircraft carriers, submarines, destroyers, and dozens of planes and helicopters. According to the official version, the mission of the expedition was to assess the capabilities of American forces to counter the Soviet Union in the event of an invasion of Antarctica. At the same time, Admiral Byrd was asked to check the region for the presence of Nazis. The expedition High Jump was planned for 8 months, with supplies for that duration, but the team spent only half the time there before hastily packing up and leaving. The reasons for such a sudden departure remained unclear. Soon rumors began to circulate that something unforeseen had occurred, prompting the fleet to retreat. Admiral Byrd's statements did not clarify the situation. On the way back, he spoke to reporters about strange things, such as that the United States must be prepared to fight against flying vehicles capable of covering the distance from pole to pole at incredible speeds. This was taken as indirect evidence of his encounter with a Nazi flying disc, against which his aviation could offer no defense. The mysteries of the Nazis remain a complex, captivating, and controversial issue. In 1944, Allied pilots saw UFOs over Germany. In underground bunkers, engineers were secretly assembling aircraft bodies and engines. At the end of the war, an SS general who led secret research disappeared without a trace. His scientists, their research, and experimental models were captured by the United States Army and transported to America. 2 years later, the first wave of UFO sightings began over America. Some experts suggest that these could have been prototypes of trophy Nazi aircraft, such as the H-9 and the Flying Wing. By the late 1950s, the United States Air Force began funding the Avrocar project, a flying disc that outwardly resembled a secret German project known as the Repulsine. In 1965, an incident occurred in Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, involving a UFO that reportedly had the shape of a bell and was covered with distinctive symbols similar to those used on Nazi aircraft, supposedly built at the end of the war. These events raised numerous questions about the mysterious secrets of UFOs. Is it possible that the Nazis actually created a successful prototype of a flying disc, and that the governments of the United States and other countries secretly continued work on this project? Were all mysterious flying objects created by earthly engineers? Is there a possibility that the government and military will ever reveal the truth about UFOs in our airspace? If it were suddenly necessary to acknowledge that flying saucers are a reality, it could deal a serious blow to trust in the United States government. When asked when the government will acknowledge this fact, many experts respond that it is unlikely to ever happen. The mystery of the Nazi UFOs remains unsolved.